The European Commission is meeting in Brussels to finalize a sixth package of EU sanctions. In a major shift, Germany says it will now back an immediate EU embargo on Russian oil. The EU has also warned member states to prepare for a possible complete breakdown in gas supplies from Russia, insisting it would not cede to Moscow's demand to pay in rubles. Kyiv says Russia's energy exports to Europe are funding the Kremlin war in Ukraine with millions of euros every day. Now, Russia provides roughly a quarter of the natural gas consumed in the European Union, more in some countries like Germany. And the vast bulk of those exports to the EU, some 80%, flow across Ukrainian soil. And the government in Kyiv earns transit fees from Russia and is still, in fact, despite the war. The toll of the conflict, of course, vastly outweighs those revenues, and that's why Ukraine has been impatient for the EU to end gas imports from Russia. Now, earlier today, I spoke with the CEO of Ukraine's state-owned Naftogaz company, Yuri Vitrenko. I asked if countries like Germany were moving fast enough.
On one hand, we are grateful for the efforts to decrease imports of Russian gas and oil that we see at the moment. We understand that often it's not easy because unfortunately Europe made itself too dependent on Russian gas and oil. Finally, at least it's happening. As I say, better late than never. So Europe and Germany in particular, and Germany is leading this way, inside the European Union, Europe is decreasing imports of Russian gas and oil. But of course, it's not enough. And we see it as a matter of fact, because this horrific war continues and civilians are being killed as we speak. So that is why we need to do more. And in order to do more, there are many things that we...
Alemania dice que ahora retrocederá y el embargo inmediato de la Unión Europea. El petróleo ruso de la Unión Europea también se ha invertido en los Estados miembros, que se preparen para una posible interrupción total del suministro de gas de Rusia, insistiendo que no vería la demanda de pagar rublos. Ahora, las exportaciones de energía de Rusia a Europa están financiando la guerra de Kremlin en Ucrania, con millones de euros todos los días. Ahora Rusia proporciona aproximadamente una cuarta del gas natural consumido en la Unión Europea. El gobierno de Kiev gana las tarifas de tránsito de Rusia y de hecho todavía lo es, pacientemente, por lo que la Unión Europea pone fin a las importaciones de gas de Rusia. Por un lado, estamos agradecidos por los esfuerzos para disminuir las importaciones de gas de petróleo rusos que vemos en el momento. Entenderemos que al final no es fácil, porque lamentablemente Europa se hizo dependiente del gas de petróleo rusos. Entonces Europa y Alemania en particular está liderando este camino dentro de la Unión Europea. Está disminuyendo importaciones de gas de petróleo rusos.
We all need to do so that Vladimir Putin regime stops getting money from Europe, again, to finance its military, to finance its public support, basically to finance its regime.
Throughout more than 2 months of this conflict so far, we've seen that gas infrastructure coming from Russia, going through Ukraine, has not been damaged in such a way as to limit the gas coming into the EU. Is there coordination between the Ukraine and Russia to ensure that this infrastructure remains untouched?
I would not call it coordination, but at the same time we do see that they're not targeting with their missiles the transit infrastructure. So they're destroying our distribution infrastructure, creating humanitarian crises all over Ukraine, but they make sure that their missiles do not hit the transit infrastructure, because they want to keep this revenue stream to their regime that is coming from exports of Russian gas and oil.
You touched on this, but how bad is the gas supply or the gas supply issues in your country in terms of getting gas throughout the country?
On one hand, we have enough gas in our storage. We have sizable local production, so we don't have any scarcity of gas at the moment. But what we have a problem with, it's the distribution infrastructure, as I mentioned. Because in order to get gas to our consumers, we need distribution networks, we need heating plants that would then produce hot water out of gas. And unfortunately, in the areas where there is some heavy fight, over there, again, the Russian army deliberately targets the pipelines, the plants, distribution stations, and we had to cut off many of our consumers, and some.
Estas cosas que todos debemos hacer para que el régimen sangriento de Putin deje de reabrir el dinero de Europa, nuevamente para financiar su ejército, para financiar su apoyo público, básicamente para financiar su régimen. Durante más de 2 meses de este conflicto hasta ahora, hemos visto la infraestructura de gas procedente de Rusia que pasa por Ucrania no se ha dañado de tal forma al límite de la entrada de gas de la Unión Europea. Existe coordinación entre Ucrania y Rusia para garantizar que esta infraestructura permanezca intacta. No lo llamaría coordinación, pero al mismo tiempo vemos que no están apuntando con sus misiles a la infraestructura de tránsito, entonces está destruyendo nuestra infraestructura de distribución. La creación es una crisis humanitaria. Está en toda Ucrania, pero no se aseguran de que estos misiles no alcancen. Entonces no tenemos escasez de gas en este momento, pero tenemos un problema con la infraestructura de distribución, como mencioné, porque la escasez que para llevar gas a nuestros consumidores necesitaríamos redes de distribución. Necesitamos calefacción. Nuevamente el ejército ruso apunta deliberadamente las restricciones de distribución de tuberías y plantas.
The infrastructure was so damaged and destroyed that there was no way to deliver gas to our customers.
Is there anything you can do to rectify those issues? Is there any appeal you can make to the EU for more supplies or any sort of technical help, or is it just a matter of those areas being in conflict?
At first, again, we made this request, but in majority of cases, frankly, again, damage was so serious that we needed to rebuild it, and in many areas heavy fights continue. In other areas where, for example, Russian troops had to leave because of the Ukrainian army, we're now trying to restore the infrastructure, currently with our own resources. We would welcome, of course, any international assistance. We understand it is coming, probably it's just too slow. But for example, in March alone, Naftogaz, the company that I have honored to manage, spent $1.3 billion as basically subsidies to our consumers as investments into infrastructure just to maintain it so that people in Ukraine were able to get enough gas.
All right, Yuri Fedchenko is CEO of Naftogaz Ukraine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Europe is desperately searching for natural gas to replace those Russian imports. On paper, at least, the continent's largest gas field beneath the Dutch city of Groningen would appear to be a good option. But years of drilling there have had a devastating side effect: earthquakes triggered by changes in pressure. Now, last week, I visited Groningen to speak with residents about their experiences. Lawrence Mengerik gives me a tour of his home. It's falling apart.
In 2014, everything was repaired. Everything was fine again.
viendo los casos de infraestructura, la infraestructura quedó tan dañada y destruida que no había forma de entregar gas a nuestros clientes. ¿Hay algún llamamiento que pueda hacer a la Unión Europea para obtener más suministros o algún tipo de ayuda técnica? Nuevamente hicimos esta solicitud para la mayoría de los casos. Francamente, el daño fue tan grave que necesitábamos reconstruirlo. Hasta en este momento, en otras zonas donde, por ejemplo, las tropas rusas tuvieron que marcharse a causa de del ejército ucraniano, donde ahora intentamos restaurar la infraestructura actual con nuestros propios recursos, daríamos la bienvenida. Por supuesto que a cualquiera entendemos que la asistencia está llegando probablemente solo para realizarse. Por ejemplo, en marzo Naftagaz, la compañía que tuvo el honor de administrar y gastar 13 millones de dólares, básicamente tiene subsidios para nuestros consumidores. Como inversiones en infraestructura solo para que la gente en Ucrania pueda obtener suficiente gasolina. Muy bien, la recondicionada Ranco es director ejecutivo de Naftagaz, Ucrania. Europa está buscando desesperadamente gas natural para reemplazar las importaciones rusas. Sobre el papel, al menos el campo de gas ciudad holandesa de Groningen pareciera ser una buena opción. La semana pasada visité Groningen para hablar con los residentes sobre sus experiencias. Lawrence Manrick me da un recorrido por su casa. Se está cayendo a pedazos. En el 2014 se reparó todo. Todo volvió a estar bien.